Welcome in. Thank you for joining. This evening, we are going to be talking about putting uh, putting pastel pencils over top of watercolors. But it's a special kind of watercolor that we'll be using, and it's handmade watercolors. So those are watercolors that someone sat there with a glass muller and the pigment and worked it in to create the watercolors, but they're grainy when they're dry. And so those grainy watercolors are perfect for receiving these kind of pastel pencils over top of them. If you want to paint along and you have watercolor paints with us, don't worry if the watercolor paints are not the same kind of um, handmade paints that dry with a rough surface. Um, you can still use regular watercolors, and instead of using pastel pencils, I like to use watercolor pencils over top, and that's what I had taught in my landscapes class. So if you're on YouTube or you're on whatnot, you can go into my past shows on my lives and you can see the ethereal landscape workshop. And there I used watercolors and I used watercolor pencils to highlight those. So if you don't have pastel pencils, you can still play along. And in place of the pastel pencils, you can just use your colored pencils or watercolor pencils. Those will work as well. Um, this is what we did last week. I was showing you how to do what I like to call extreme collage, because you're just covering the whole surface, your whole paper surface with all different kinds of collage papers, and then you're coming in afterwards and making some marks on those. And so these are some of the finished pieces of artwork that I made from the pieces that we had started last week. And you can see I went around the outside with this one with gold and then signed it down here. I added more just lines and designs on it. This is a second one that I did. So these are collage hearts, and they are available in the Buy It Now on Whatnot. They can come in a mat, either a white mat or a black mat. Let me show you what those look like. And they'll be on a backing board. So for instance, here's the second one that I showed you that has the red around the edges. It will come on a backing board with the mat, like that, so that it'll fit right in there. That's what it looks like on black. And then this is what it would look like on white. And those photographs of both the black and the white, what it would look like on the black and what it would look like on the white, is in the Buy It Now on Whatnot. So, hey there, Mustang Patty, welcome in. So, if you want to see these available for sale now as finished pieces of artwork, matted and ready to go into an 8x10 frame, then go ahead and take a look in Whatnot on the Buy It Now, and you will find this piece and this piece that were made last week. It was so exciting to do it together with everybody. Also, this evening, when I get to the auction part of the show, is a new card. So this is a blank card. They are signed original pieces of artwork. This is the same kind of extreme collage as what we were making last week, like this. This, of course, was because last week was Valentine's, just before Valentine's Day. So we were using the heart theme. And this one, instead of cutting out the heart, I showed how you can paint around your collage, keeping the square rectangular shape, and still get the same basic effect there of having a heart. So this one will be available when we start to do the auction this evening. But I did want to show you kind of the finished artwork from last week's workshop. And if you didn't get a chance to watch last week's workshop, it is available as excuse me, a rerun from both my past shows on Whatnot as well as it's available on YouTube. So if you have friends that aren't on Whatnot yet, you can encourage them to go over to my YouTube channel. If you just type in Tristina and then art, you will find my YouTube channel. And from last week, you'll see collage hearts two ways, and that's the workshop that that I taught last week. So these will be available when we get to the auction part of the show. So if you are on YouTube and you want to take part in the giveaway tonight will be a finished collage, extreme collage artist card. And plus there's a whole set like this of new hot out of the studio today artist cards, originals. Those will also be auctioned at the end of the art class. So that is what we have coming up. Woohoo! But if you didn't hear earlier, if you just came in, we are doing a workshop today, which is watercolor and then enhancing the watercolor after it's dry with um, pastel pencils. So this is an example that's available in the Buy It Now on Whatnot. And the background color, so here is kind of an aqua blue, and here's purple. That was done with watercolor and the brown. And then afterwards, I came in and I highlighted it like this purple here is using the pastel pencils, as well as at the tips here, I used pastel pencils. And this little one, like this, also these lines are all pastel pencils. And down here, the background is watercolor, but in the foreground, I used pastel pencils. So you're going to get to see how I highlight my watercolor paintings with pastel pencils. We're going to do two things. I'm going to show you how to actually do the watercolor painting. And then secondarily, I'm going to show you how you're going to use your pastel pencils to update it or upgrade it. And so here's one that's already done that's just waiting for the pastel pencils. A couple of mushrooms. I just did them rather plainly in the background. And then we're going to go in and put some details in onto that artwork with the pastel pencils. This is another one that I did with a different brand of watercolor paint. This is a sakura, so that's your cherry blossoms like from in Japan. And I'm going to show you how to make the cherry blossoms. Super easy as long as you have a round brush. So you have a round brush like this, a round watercolor brush, you're good to go to make some sakuras. And then again, this paint is a handmade paint, and so it has a little bit of grittiness to it, and that grittiness is going to allow us to put the pastel pencil. It'll have some tooth to stick to with the pastel pencil. So those are ones that I'm going to show you how to highlight them using the pastel pencils, because I'm not going to sit here and make you wait for my watercolor paintings to finish drying. Oh, so I am going to go ahead and go over top of the table. So that is Canson XL watercolor paper. Let me make sure that we are in frame. Yes, we are. And I just want to be able to move that up and get my water up out of the way. All right, good. So this is Canson XL watercolor paper. You're going to notice it says 140 pound. That's what I like to work on. And I love to work on the 9 by 12 size because the 9 by 12 size fits perfectly into an 11 by 14 mat or frame. Um, I mean, even if it's 11 by 14 frame, you're still going to need to have a mat with the 11 by 14 frame. But so that this paper fits perfectly into there. The other nice thing about this paper is if you put it on its side like this and you cut it in half, these two pieces will fit into the 8 by 10 frame. So this is or mat. So this is your 8 by 10 mat. And so that fits that side and this side. You're going to be able to get two 8 by 10 pieces of artwork out of it if you're doing it if you want to cut it in half. So it's a very economical size. It's my favorite size of paper to work with. Um, Now, as far as the paints that we're going to use tonight, we're going to use handmade paints. These are from a company called Boulder Colors. So let me bring this up for you so you can see that right there. There's the logo, Boulder, like Boulder, Colorado. That's where the lady's from who makes this paint, Boulder Colors. You can find her on Instagram and see her process, but she literally takes plants, flowers, and leaves and distills them down and makes pigments out of it, and then grinds the pigment in a coffee grinder and then adds a watercolor base to it. So these paints that come from natural plants, they are not finely ground. They're a larger pigment size. So the really neat thing about it that I discovered after painting with them for a little bit, because I'm on the lady that makes them, I'm on her annual uh, subscription for the second year now. Oh, hi there. I see Heidi Lopez in the YouTube. Thank you for being there. And if you want to join us later for the giveaway and the art auction, then feel free also to sign up for Whatnot. The link is in the description of the YouTube video, or you can find it by scanning the code that's on YouTube. So to get back to this, the lady who makes the paints um, grinds the paints in a coffee maker, and so the particle size is large. And what that means is that when you paint with it, like this painting, there's actually a gritty feeling to the surface. And that made me think, oh my gosh, I can put pastel over top of this because pastels like a gritty surface, something with what we call tooth in order for it to attach to. And the pastel pencils work amazingly well her. Um, with her paints because there's that grittiness to it. Now, that's one company called Boulder Colors, and that's as in Boulder, Colorado, Boulder Colors. The other company that whose paints I use to get a similar effect, these are paint stones by a company called Beam Paints, Beam Paints. Both of these companies are women owned, so the Boulder Colors and this one, Beam Paints, they are women owned. These folks are Indigenous folks from up in Canada, in Northwest Canada, and they hand make these individual paints. So again, they're taking pigments and they're mulling the pigments and creating watercolors and putting them in these really cool papers. And they'll use paper and they'll use wax. And the neat thing is that there's no plastic with theirs, no plastic. Um, and so they use fabrics and they use papers, and a lot of what they use is indigenously made up in that northwest of Canada. But these paints also have a larger particle size. And so when they dry, they're a little finer than the Boulder Colors, but they still do have a little bit of grit to them, which makes them good for doing something like enhancing them with the pastels. And like I said, we're going to first paint with these, and then I'm going to show you using the pastel pencils, the mushrooms and the sakura that I already did that are dry. So let's talk about brushes because this is the paints that we're working with. And then the brushes I'm going to work with are some of my favorites are the Princeton Velvet Touch. That's what this one is right here. And so the Princeton Brush Company, they have lots of different types of brushes, but I really like the Velvet Touch because if you look at the tip here, it's what I call very snappy, plus it comes to a nice point. So to me, that's very important especially when I'm doing flowers and leaves, anything like that. I like that snappy point. Now, this is a size 6, and this one is a size 10, but you can see on both of them, you see how the shape of the tip is. You can get nice detail in there with that kind of a tip on those. Now, I have lots of different ones of these Princeton Velvet Touch. This is an angled shader if you need to cover a large area, or they have just all kinds of other tops. There are a lot of options available within the Princeton paint lines. Now, I did want to let you know that I don't sell these paints, nor do I sell the brushes. But if you want to get information on how to get those items, because I sell art, you are welcome to go to my website. So right here, let's see, my website, deetzart.com. When you click on deetzart.com, it will flip you over to deetzart.gallery, but it's the same website. And then you see if you're on Whatnot and you want to go to my YouTube, that is my you just type in Tristina and art and you'll find me on YouTube. And if you're on YouTube and you'd like to check out the Whatnot, I'm at Tristina's Attic on Whatnot. And if you're on Whatnot and you enjoy the art classes that I teach, there is a function when you go into the shop, which is the little house at the bottom of the screen. There's a function to give tips. So I always appreciate tips. And I love to get tips during the show. I try to, um, I'm hoping that I'm watching the screen when the tips come in so that I can acknowledge you and thank you very much. But if you are on YouTube and you'd like to give me a tip, I take tips at coffee.com. So that's ko-fi.com. And I'm Tristina Dietz Art on coffee.com. And that way you can participate in throwing tips as well. And if you'd like to follow me on Instagram, I do announce ahead of time these workshops on my Instagram account. So just go to Dietz Art on Instagram. And most of the time they come through to Facebook as well. So if you're not on Instagram, but you're on Facebook, it's Tristina Dietz Art. And then that way you'll know when the classes are coming up and when I'm teaching. So I would love to have you come into the classes with me. Now, let's go ahead. One last thing that I'm going to show you. Well, of course, we need water. So you can see that I have my water here. I always have two waters and lots of paper towels. And then once we move on to the dry phase, these are the pastel pencils that I use. And I did lots of research before selecting this particular group of our set of pastel pencils. And let me mention something else about pastel pencils to you. When you're working with pastel in general, you're not blending it. You can put down one color and then kind of mix it with another color. And I do use a blending stump sometimes to help get those blends. But in general, your colors are going to come from the variety of pencils that you have. So you're going to notice that this is the 48 set. And that's what I found was the best value for me. Of course, there are larger sets and there are smaller sets if you wanted to try them out. But I thought, you know what? If I'm going to make that initial investment, let me go ahead and get the 48 because of the nature of pastels. And then uh, they're also another reason that I chose these Stabilo Carbothello pastels is because of sharpening them. Some of the pastels are very brittle, and there are different ways that you can sharpen them on a sanding surface or on with a traditional um, sharpener like this, but these Carbothellos by Stabilo tend to hold up better when you're sharpening them and they're less likely to crumble, which is why I chose the Carbothellos. But that's what we're going to be working with when we get to that part of the show. I did want to let you know about them. Now, just like the paints, I will have information on those. on that set of pastel pencils on my website. After the show tonight, I'll go pop them into my website, so you'll have access to that. But there's already access to um, under supply links, you can find links to these Princeton Velvet Touch brushes. All right, let's go ahead. I'm going to start out by wetting my brush. Very simple. So I'm putting that in there in the water. And then I don't particularly like to go, although most of the time I get a lot of that water off of there because I don't want excess water that's on the ferrule, the metal part here, to drip into what I'm working on. But when I'm first starting out with painting with these paints, I do use a lot of water to get them wet. As a matter of fact, let me use this set instead because I really like this set, the grittiness of this set instead. So let's pick out a couple of colors that we're going to use for these flowers. This is a nice sort of deep purple. Now these happen to just have magnets on the back of them. Let's see, what else are we going to use here? We're definitely going to use that green. This latest color that came in, borage, we'll put that one there. We're going to, let's see, for the branch, this is a good one, and this is a good one. So what you may or may not notice is often I will pick two variations of a color. This is kind of a blue-green right there for leaves. So I've got two greens, I've got two browns, and now for the flowers, there's not really a bright pink. What I'm going to be showing you how to do is the sakura flower. So the sakura is the Japanese cherry blossom. So since there's not a really good pink in here, I'm going to move over to these colors. And it's okay to mix variations of different brands of watercolor. Don't worry about that. It's the color you're going for. Um, but both of these colors, brands, give you that nice gritty surface when they're dry, so that we'll be able to use the pastel pencil on them. So in here, I have some really nice reds and pinks. Let's see what this one is called. Cherry magenta. And sometimes if there's excess on the side, you can tell what the color is there, but there's a nice cherry magenta and purple. Now this color right here that looks like bubblegum pink, this is actually a gouache. So a gouache is just an opaque watercolor. So this one is a transparent watercolor and this one is an opaque watercolor. So what I'm going to do is I normally will lay down the transparent color first and then come in with the opaque color just to highlight on top. What some other people like to do is that some artists like to put their gouache color, which is their more opaque color, down first and then come over top of it with a quick little wash of the transparent afterwards. So it's just a matter of preference what you like to do. And now that I've got my paints set off, let's move these over a little bit so you can see them a little bit better. What I'm going to do here, and these actually go up here with that kind of purpley, I mean that kind of blue green right there. So what I'm going to start with is I'm going to take just some water and I'm going to spray the paint with water. And that's just to get the paint to begin to loosen up. When you're using paint that is in pans, and that's what these are called, these are paint pans, even though the folks at Beam like to call theirs paint stones, this unique way that they wrap them, but they're considered pans. And what I'm going to do first is I like to build the flowers first. Some people like to build the branch first, but I like to place the flowers and then build the branches around the flowers. So let's take this one, which is the beautiful pink, that magenta, cherry magenta. And I'm just working the brush in there to get plenty of it on my brush. Now, if I go and I try to use this the way it just came out of the paint stone, here's what you're going to see. You're going to see the color is quite dense. I like my artwork to be a little more wishy-washy, and then I can go in later and get it more darkened. So I like to start with a lighter color first. So I'm going to dip it in there to get it wet. It still has the color in it I picked up, but now it's a little bit wet. And a cherry blossom almost looks like a heart. So you've got one half here, and then the leaf has another half. So it has a little split at the top and it looks almost like a heart. And so that's why having this kind of a brush with that tip is very helpful for making these kind of flowers. So plenty of water on my brush here. I just start by making a stroke down and then bringing it out and around to make it a little uh, fluffier, kind of like that. Now I'm not getting more paint in there, and I'm going to move my hand around, but you could move your paper around if you're more comfortable with that. So I'm going to do the same thing here, and I'm going to round that a little bit more. And then I'm going to do this half right here. And in this case, I moved my brush so it rounded. Now I'm going to leave that center empty. I'm going to leave the center empty because I want these petals to get, um, I want the petals to dry and then come back in and do the center after the petals are dry. So I picked up a little more paint and I got more water on the tip there. And now we're going to come in. Let's see if this is going to be in my way. That's the thing with the handle here, right? You need to have the room. Okay, here we go. And then I'm in that case, I twisted the brush like this as I brought it around, and that gave me the rounded sides. But you can always just do a straight down and a straight down like this, and then come in and add the rounded edges to it like that. There we go. So that's one of the sakura flowers. The funny thing is, it doesn't look like a lot right now, but then as you build everything else around it, and then you begin to see, oh, okay, all right. Then you're going to end up with your little stamen in the middle, and we're going to use some of the pastel pencils on it to give some of the definition. Now, I tend to be a messy painter, and right now I just got a few pink spots on there. One of the things you can do with those spots is you can just paint right over top of them. Like I can create a flower right here or another flower right here, and then that will just use it up. If for some reason you get paint where you don't want it, there's a special brush that I use for that. And oh, hello there, Deloy 89 over on Whatnot. Thank you for joining. Thank you, thank you. So in order to clean these up as quickly as possible, there is a blender brush from the also part of the Princeton Velvet Touch line, and it's a little bit stiffer on the end. So I just get that wet. I don't want it too wet. And then I come in here and I scrub that, and then I dry it. And so that it doesn't always pick up because it depends on the strength of the staining power of the paint that you have on your paper. So it depends on your paper, it depends on the paint and whether it's a staining color or not. Um, and then it depends on when you scrub on the paper if this brush actually makes the paper pill up. That's why I recommended that particular paper to you, because I find I can do corrections on that paper, and it'll take one or two corrections and then it'll start to pill up. All right, so now that I've got the pink on there, I would go through and do a whole bunch of pink flowers. So I'm not going to spend a long time on doing a bunch of pink flowers, but That's a flower when you're looking at it straight on. Now, what if I'm looking at a flower from the side? So I can go ahead and do the petals again, and some of the petals are going to be smaller and some of the petals are going to be larger, right? So this is if I'm going to be looking at the flower more from the side. So don't worry about getting it perfect. This one is slightly angled to the side like that. And so when I go and I build the center will be going out in that direction instead of straight, kind of straight on like it would be on this one. Let's add a little bit more water. And down here, I'm going to put a bud. So I like to just use a couple of strokes like this to create a bud. Let's do that. And then that's going to be a flower that hasn't quite opened yet. All right. So that's the three, straight on, the side looking, and then a little bud. Now, sometimes the bud will be just really teeny tiny. And let's do a tiny bud right here. And it's just going to be a uh, single set of petals, or you can always add one or two more petals off to the side like that. So that would be more like a bud. Now, here I've just used this pink, right? And I'm going to clean this off and dip it in the water and get more of the color out. I don't have to be too careful. I cross-pollinate my colors all the time. This one is a little purple. And so what if I add a little bit of purple in there with that pink color, just to give a little bit of definition and a little bit of extra zhuzh to the colors, huh? This way I can take the purple and kind of build in a little bit of extra drama. And that's what I like to do is just give the hint of, oh, okay, there's like some shadow down in here. Now, you may notice when I paint very loosely. I'm not a realist. That's not my intention is to be a realist. Mine is more to be an impressionist. And so it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's just throwing a little bit of shadow in there. If the pink is too wet when you go to throw this shadow in, the shadow will just melt right into the piece. So it does help, or into the flower. So it does help that the flowers are dry already if you want to place the uh, this shadow in a certain place. It's easier when it's already dry to do that. So I'm just adding that little bit of shadow down into the middle of it to give it a little extra dimension. Now, when I go and I'm adding my pastel pencil later, I like to work with both a dark color down here and a light color up at the top so that I get a deepen the shadows and I increase the highlights that way. But that will come later. Here I'm just going to put a little bit of purple in the bottom there to give it a little bit of definition. And here, there. All right. Now you don't have to do that step if you liked it just the way it was, where it was pink. Don't do it. Or if you feel like you put too much in, you can get your brush wet, as I just did, like this, and then you can pull out some of the color. So if you feel like you put in too much purple and you wanted to lighten it, that's what I'm doing here. You can also take a clean part of your paper towel and go like that and lift some of that purple out as well. But I kind of liked having a little bit more purple down in there, so I'm going to add it back in. All right, so that's creating the flowers. Now for the greenery, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to start with a lighter color, and I'm just using the same brush. Now, I don't know if you can see that, but right there, there's a big blob of water. So that's why when I get water in my brush, I often will just clean off this metal part so I don't have water blopping down into my brush as I paint. Okay, there we go. So we want to start with the lighter color and then move to the accent colors here. And I see I just got some water on there, so I'm going to clean that up. Now, for the leaves on the little bud, you can just make an impression of the leaves here because a bud is going to have the leaves close to it. And usually I'll wait till the bud is dry and then I even drop one right in here. Let me bring it up closer so you can see. I'll drop one right there, but I can't do that while this is still wet because if I do, the two colors will blend together and I don't want them blending together. So there we've got just a little bit of greenery around there. We're going to bring some greenery. Super simple, right? This is not hard. All right, so we put a little bit of greenery around that one. Now, the greenery that we're going to put around these flowers is a little more mature. This is just the bud is beginning to open, so the leaves are super close to the bud, right? Now, if you want to do leaves for these, I will generally come out one of the sides like this. And again, I'm turning my brush as I bring it out, and I'll do one half and then a second half. So I usually will do my leaves in two parts. So I'm doing that side and then this side. So there we've got two. And then I'll come over here. Oh, there we go. I'm trying to twist my hand, right? Sorry that you can't see that because I've got my hand up above there. But there we've got that one, and maybe I put one up here. Okay, so I love the pop of the pink and purple against the green. It looks so pretty. All right, and then let's do a little bit more here off the side of this one. Now the leaves, if they're going to be on their side, are going to be a little skinnier than the leaves that you might see directly from the top. Now also, I noticed that this is wet, and this blender brush has a hard plastic back to it. So while your leaves are still wet, so I'm just adding a little more wetness to that one, you can use this hard backing and you can scribe into the leaves, and that will give it, as it dries, you will see a subtle, can you see that? You'll see the subtle veining of the leaves. So I love using this back end here and putting some veins in. Of course, that's optional, but I just thought I would show it to you because there's more to this scrubber brush than just the blending aspect of it. There's the hard plastic back end that you can use to scribe into your paper as well. All right, so let's get another leaf right here. Just skinny because they're on their side. And another one out here. So I'm not being too careful there, but now let me show you the branch because those have to dry before I can drop another color in with it, right? So here I have the two colors. I have a darker and a lighter. I'm going to start with the lighter and then I could get darker. There we go. So there's a pretty tan color. And so when I'm doing branches, I like to turn my brush a lot. And the reason is because it gives me a more random line. Instead of the line being perfect and straight, which you're certainly welcome to do that when you paint. But I like to do it where I twist I turn the brush a little bit, and that's going to give me a more organic look to what it is that I'm creating. So let's say that the branch comes down here, and then I'm twisting it and moving it, thick branch there, and coming out this side. So that's the beginning of the branch, and of course, you're going to have a piece that comes out to the flowers, right? There we go. So the flowers are coming off of the branch. But that's just my first layer. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab some of this dark. And actually, while that's still wet, I'm going to drop some of the dark in. Now I did drip some, so I'm picking it up right away. So I put some of the dark brown. I'm going to get a little bit of water on there. And now I'm going to lay that dark brown in together with this one. So don't be afraid to use the colors. Well, I call it mixing it right on the paper because I could have mixed colors together in a palette and then put them down, but then I wouldn't have this layering effect of, oh, there's some of the lighter color, there's some of the darker color, there's some water on there, excess, so it'll give you unexpected effects if you do it that way of just letting it combine on its own on the paper. All right, there we go. Now, often I go back and I adjust what I see after it's dry. So you're certainly not stuck with what's there. You can fix it later. Now I'm going to get the color out of my brush here, and now I'm going to go back and put some leaves right here. I am just making a mess today because of my setup. I keep dropping water on here. Normally, my water is off to the right because I'm right-handed. If you're left-handed, you put the water off to the left. And that way, when you go to clean your brush and then bring it over to your paint, you're not dripping it all over your artwork like I am today. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the green again, and I'm going to lay in some tender leaves right up here at this end. So there's the two strokes to get my leaf. And then I'm going to do another here and another small one in here. There you go. So just something to put at the end. And I usually will add more leaves as well somewhere else because normally on a tree branch, you've got leaves sticking all over the place. So let us, right? That leaf could be coming from the other side, and another one over here. I'm trying to do it so that you can also see it, which is not always easy to do if I can't turn my paper, but there you go. So normally I would come in and pop in some more leaves there, but let's move along to doing a second color on the leaves now that these leaves up here, for the most part, are dry. So I'm going to grab, I have an option of two different depths of color. So this one is a little bit lighter and this one is a little bit darker. I think I'm going to go with the lighter one first, right? And then I can always decide to add more with the darker one. Now, don't fret if you put a darker color down. As I showed you earlier, you can just add a little bit of water and lift that back up. You want to have a good watercolor paper that allows you to do lifting. Just regular papers don't have sizing in them that lets you lift. You want to be sure that you're using a good quality watercolor paper so that if you do need to lift color back up, you can. So let's drop this in over here. And it's just to give it a little bit of variety, right? So I'm just darkening that just a little bit with an interesting color. So the way I like to work with my paintings is the colors I use, I want them to be not necessarily what you would find in nature. I want them to be colors that are maybe a surprise, maybe something that's unexpected. And then that way, the artwork has an it'll have an unusual finish to it. Okay, let's get a little bit of that blue in there and a little bit down in here. So that's I like to come back and just sort of blue up my green leaves a little bit, and that gives you that sense of depth with the leaves. Here, we'll just put a blue one right there and something like that. These ones here are very new, so I don't need too much blue in there. That's why I added a little bit of water to that. There we go. Just for something different. Okay, so my leaves can be two-tone, tritone. Um, you can just go crazy with that and have as much fun with it as you like. But that is the general idea of how you're going to build your painting. And it could be any subject. It could be an animal. It could be a landscape. In this case, it's a floral. I have this one here, which is mushrooms, which are kind of fun. So let's move on to my dry version of this sakura, which is the um, cherry blossoms, and let me show you how I come back in with these pastel pencils and do some um, well, zhuzhing up, highlighting, making it a little bit more fun. So let's move these out of the way. I'm going to put those away because I'm going to have to put my paper there. All right, there we go. And then this one is going to go back in the pink one here. I found these at just like a dollar store or something, and they're so cool because they're clear on top, so I can see exactly what's inside. And then it has a magnet on the bottom, so if I want to stick it on to a cabinet or something, it sticks to it. They're so cool. Okay, so let's do the next one then that we want to do is this one right here. Oh, it's heavy. There we go. So let me make sure that that is in the frame for you. Oh, nice. Yes, it does look like it's in the frame. Fantastic. So what I've done here is, in this particular case, I just used the one brown. I didn't use the second brown, but I did use multiple colors on the leaves and multiple colors on the flowers. Now I want to come in and create the centers for the flowers and zhuzh it up a little bit. Now, I had mentioned before, if you're going to use the pastel pencils and you're going to be highlighting like that, you may want to sharpen your pencils. If you do, this is what I recommend for that, for this particular brand, which is the Stabilo Carbothello. Um, because as I said, the tips don't break so much. Hey there, what is that? Welcome in, and plus bus, thanks for joining this evening over on Whatnot. Um, so this is an interesting sharpener from Koh-i-Noor, KOH-I-NOOR, and I'll add this to my website under the supply links heading. Um, and the interesting thing is you've got three different lengths. So there's the long one, there's a super short one, and there's a medium one. So you can see the blade, plus the little screw here lets you replace the blades. Um, Really, really nice. And what I've found with these pencils is I like to use the medium one, not the long one. But you're going to experiment with it and decide which ones you prefer. Let's put down a paper towel here. So this one looks like it has already been sharpened in this shorter one here. So let's see if I can get this sharp without breaking it. That's always the thing. Some people say that they take it and they put it in the freezer and then they sharpen, and that helps to hold the pastel together. But what I found is these carbothellos are they have a nice, they're harder than your softest pastel pencils, but they're not the hardest. And so they do sharpen very nicely. So that one actually sharpened pretty nicely. And I'm going to be using that on these flowers. Let me see what else. This one I sharpened earlier, which is kind of a pinky orange. And what we can do, I always have off to the side when I'm working, I always have spare watercolor paper so that I can test things. So let's test this one. Ooh, that's a little bit more orange than I want to use on these. So that one I will set aside. And then here's one I sharpened earlier, which is a beautiful pink. Now let's see where the colors are. It says 1400, 335. So I expect 335 is the color. Yeah, this one's 311. And they have the light fast ratings. Some of them do, some of them don't. Okay, so let's test this one. Yeah, I like that one a lot. It's quite bright, and I really like bright colors. But that one's very bright, and let's test this one, which has a bit of a purpley finish to it. Ah, that's almost closer in tone to what I'm working with, so I may want to use this one first, which is a little more purple. But why don't we look? Why don't we look inside here? See what we have. There may be something a little bit more, a little bit in between these two. And so here's one that is more red, and here's one that is more burgundy. So we'll test these two as well. But you can see this has a lifting area here, and there's another set there. Plus, it does come with a Stabilo with a little eraser. I'm sorry, with a little sharpener. And then this is a gum kneaded eraser. So if you need to lift it back up, you use your kneaded eraser. Ooh, there's some nice sort of greeny colors. Let's pull all of those out. What the heck? And then of course for the brown, we'll get to the brown later, maybe not. We'll see. Okay. So let's look at these two, because we know that this purple one goes with that and this pink one goes with that. So let's test these two right here. This one. Wow, that's really red. Okay, I know I'm not going to be using that one because I don't want to use red. And this one is kind of burgundy-ish. Wow, it's very burgundy to where it looks like wine. It's almost brown, right? So I would save that for the very, very deep inside here if that's what I wanted to use it for. And then I need something to make the little stamen on the inside of these flowers. Often I just grab a marker like this micron pen, and then I go to town and I'm using black. But in this case, I want to be a little softer. And so I'm going to be using the pastel. Okay. So that's a nice dark brown right there. And it's very close to this wine right here. So I'm not likely to use the wine because it's very close to this one. And so I'm going to set the wine aside for right now. We can always change our mind later, right? And then let me see, there's one more here, which is a little bit lighter brown. Let's see. So that's a little bit lighter brown. I don't know that I like that. I like the darker one. So definitely it's invaluable to have a little piece of paper next to what it is that you're going to be working on in order to test out your colors. And I'm seeing a little bit of dust that got on here. So let me just take that off. All right. So now I'm going to work with, before I put the little stamen on the flower, and that's these little things right here. They're going to have the yellow on top like that, right? That's what you see in the center of a flower often. Before I do that, I want to go in and deepen the centers here just a little bit. So let's use, I'm going to just live dangerously and use the purple. What the heck? So I'm going to come in with some purple. And the nice thing about this paint is it's very gritty. So because it's very gritty, it will allow me to put the pastel on there and have it actually hold it in place. Now, some of this is a little bit, where's that other one? See, I am going to need this darker one because right where the two leaves or the petals meet each other, I need it to be a little deeper. Now, let me bring this up close so you can see. It's sitting right on top of the paper, right? And if I want to blend it in, you know, a lot of people tend to use their finger to do blending. I don't like to use my finger to do blending because I feel like using my finger to do blending gets oils from my fingers on there. And I don't have as much control with the end of my finger as I do with something like this. So these are blending stumps, and you can see they come in various sizes. Um, this is a blending stump because it's got the cone on both ends. If it's wrapped paper and it only has the cone on one end, it's called a tortillon. So you might see it listed as a tortillon. But what I'm going to do is take the tip of this, and then I can come in here and I can refine that so it doesn't look quite so dusty and it actually blends a little bit better. It's up to you. You can leave it looking like chunky pastel on top, or you can blend it like that. So you see the difference between it sitting on top here and blended in here. So I love the extra depth that using a pastel pencil gives me with something like this because it's so unusual. People are like, how the heck did you do that? Well, now you're learning the secret to what it is that I'm doing. I'm going in here and I'm adding something unexpected in this case to my flowers, and then I'm blending it in like that. Now, if you blend it and then you decide that you want to, oh, I blended it too much, then you just go back and add a little bit more. So usually for my last layer, I will go in and I will use just a little bit on top there because I want you to see that I was using a pastel. Now you'll hear me blowing because I'm blowing away the dust. Some people blow off the dust, some people don't. Some people have a little air can, and then they just sort of go psh, 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 like that, and that will get rid of the dust. Or you can work vertically, which is you put your paper up on an easel like this, and then you work. The only thing is with the easel, okay, just in my experience with an easel, if you're going to do it with the easel, you end up getting a lot of dust down on the rest of your painting, in my experience. And then you can tend to get some muddiness down here. If you're going to use it on an easel, I find it works better uh, if you do one half. So let's say I would do the lower half, and then I would flip it over, and then I would do the other half. That way you have um, less possibility of, if I was working from bottom to top or top to bottom, you would have less opportunity of this fallout to get in your other designs if you flip it as you're working on it, okay? But I don't wanna mess with that, so I just, lay it flat. In this case, I'm only using 1 or 2 layers of pastel. When I'm working on just a pastel painting and it's much larger, then I will put that on an easel and I tap it. So I would take it like this and I would go tap, tap like that, and periodically to get the dust to come off. But that would be a painting that almost the entire painting would be pastel, so I could go back in different areas and use a pastel to fix it. When you're working with watercolor like this, and you've got lots of white in here, I don't find that works as well. I find what works better is to use some sort of blowing it off so that you get that pastel away from your artwork and not all over this white area right here. So let me take some of this bright pink. So we were just working with this kind of purpley color and a um, like a wine color and going down inside here. But this bright pink, I could use up here and sort of highlight into so I could bring the light pink up in that area, and that would help give me a very soft, diffused, brighter pink. I like bright pinks. So I could actually work over top of the watercolor. So it's not as critical when you're doing this type of technique to have your watercolor um, painting perfect when you're done with it, because you're going to be coming back in and refining it um, with these pastel pencils. So let's go ahead and put some of the brown stamens in here, right? So the center of the flower is going to have these spots right here. We're building it like that. Actually, these flowers, Sakura, have tons and tons and tons of these little stamens inside them. But the nice thing is here, that yellow should sit on top there so that you'll be able to see it. I'll show you that in just a second. So I can build up 1 or 2 layers of the yellow and you'll actually see the yellow on top. Whereas if I was only doing watercolor, you wouldn't necessarily be able to see that. Okay, there you go. So now you can see the little stems coming up, and then you can see the little yellow bits right on top there. All right, so that's for the flowers like that. And of course, for the leaves as well, I would do the same thing. Let's take one here, and I could come in and do some refining with this, and then bring a little bit darker in. And so really you're just refining, refining, refining. Now, when I am at the point where I have the painting the way I want it, I'm going to fix it in place. That's so if I accidentally brush it, I'm not going to disturb the pastel that I've put on it. So here, that's when I would use the Degas fixative. And this is non-toxic, odor-free, all natural. The reason the cows are on here is because it's casein based from cows, from cow's milk. But it was used by Degas when he would do his pastels. And the cool thing about it is that it's not an aerosol, it's a pump. So you can do it right here in your studio and you don't have a terrible or excess smell. Now, to use it, you have to first I shake it, then I hold the bottle straight up and down, and then I'm back here and I spray it gently and let it come and fall down. And I get my best results that way. Um, Now, just now I see a couple of like little blobs of it here. You want to try to avoid getting blobs of it on your work. And so usually what I'll do is when I'm finished with a session of spraying, I'll go rinse this top right here. And if you rinse it, then that will help to prevent it from spattering the next time you go to use it. But again, that's the Spectrafix Degas Fixative, and it is non-aerosol, which is so cool. I love that about it. Oh, I didn't put my citrus over here. Let's do these. Oh, I love the mushrooms. Okay, so actually with the mushrooms, I want to put them on top of here to give it a little bit of stability. Whoopsies. Hold on, my phone was falling down. Needed to see what's going on over there on YouTube on the YouTubes. Hey there, Sally Shops. Welcome in, welcome in. I'm showing how to work with watercolors, handmade watercolors, and then how to take pastel pencils and go back in and work over top of your gritty handmade watercolors to enhance them. Okay, so let's look at some of these. Let's see, I want to go in here first. Now, right on top of this mushroom, I could do um, some little marks on there. So let's see, what color are we gonna use? Maybe use this burgundy. So remember, oh, there's also this pretty orange right here. Maybe we'll start with the orange. That's the thing. When you have so many colors to choose from, it's a challenge. It's a blessing, but it can also be a challenge. So there's the orange. There's the color orange. And let's see, do I want to? I'm thinking what I want to do is build these little, oftentimes on the surface of your mushrooms, you've got these little sort of outcroppings that end up coming there. So I'm beginning to build, I'm using two colors, one for the actual mark that's going to be on the mushroom, and the other one is the shadow underneath it, right? So there we go. And then let's bring this in here. What I love is this is very gritty, like I was saying. So because the surface is gritty, it makes it perfect for doing this kind of. So there I'm beginning to build some really cool marks on these mushrooms. And so that is how easy it is to enhance this. Right, so we got the primary color and then we've got the shadow underneath it because it's sticking off the surface of the mushroom like that. So I will go all over the mushrooms. I might change the colors a little bit between each mushroom. Underneath here, I want to get a little bit more definition. So let's take this burgundy one and let's see right here. I want to make sure that this area, instead of using a marker, I could go in and use a marker, right? I could take a marker like this. Hey, what is that? Thanks for the smiley face. I could take a micron pen and go in and do the outlines, but then it would be more graphic and more literal, where this is going to give you a softer finish than that. So what am I doing? I'm getting the edge here. I'm building on the edge. So let's do that. Now, I need to soften it. It's not done yet. Okay, where's this one? Here's this little one right here. So I'm going to come in with this. And I'm going to soften that. There. And now I've got a little bit more. And I'm actually pushing it a little bit in. That's the beautiful thing about using the stump, is you can also feather those edges a little bit. Okay, so now you can see the difference between here and what we have going here. This was the beginning of the underside, but then I wanted to come in and I wanted to um, give it that extra zhuzh. Now let's say that this curls a little bit. So I'm using one of the browns. Ooh, let's use this brown right here. And I'm gonna notice I'm not using it up and down like this. I'm holding it on its side like this so I can get the side of it and deposit a little bit more there. So I'm just playing around with getting a little more emphasis on there. And then the magic comes in the blending here. Like I said, if I blended it and I felt like I blended it too much, I could just go back and add a little bit more. But if you think that you added too much, then you're going to want to use the kneaded eraser to pull some of it out. So I'm beginning to do that push and pull between what's in shadow and what's in light. If you have an area that you think is in light, you can add white or a much lighter color. Maybe we'll try using a little bit of yellow in here. And the yellow doesn't really look good. I don't like the yellow. So we'll just go right over top of it with some white. Just to kind of make it look like there's a little bit of a highlight in that area right there. And now I don't want to use the same piece that I've been doing the darker colors with unless you do this on a paper towel and take that color off. Hey, Foxhound, welcome in, welcome in. So you want to be sure there's no excess color on your blending stump if you're moving between darks and lights, right? And often I will literally use a separate uh, stump between the darker colors and the lighter colors. Okay, so that's just beginning to give a feel of the difference between a highlight and a low light there, a darkening and a highlighting. All right, so let's go to the edge of this green circle here. So I want to emphasize the edge of the green circle. Let me start with a lighter color. I can always go darker, right? So let's start with this color right here. Oh, that actually looks like it will look really good. So especially when you have a circle like this, it can look really nice to darken that edge. So, didn't I just have the blending stump in my hand? Yeah. There we go. So now when I use the blending stump, I'm actually wanting to feather it a little bit so that it gives it a feel of roundness. So I'm pulling it in, pulling it in. Instead of using it right on the tip, I'm using the side of that blending stump. So again, whoops, I didn't do a very good job of cleaning that end, did I? There we go. So I want to highlight that, but I don't want it to be a hard edge. I want it to be a soft edge. So now and you can just keep depositing it. You can also go like a little bit darker right on the very, very edge there. So that way you get a little bit lighter color toward the inside and a little bit darker color toward the outside. I like using the pastel pencils because they let me be more precise about where I'm putting my color as opposed to using a traditional pastel stick. Pastel sticks you can get, if they're square, you can use the uh, edge of the square, but the edge of the square wears down pretty quickly. So that's why I like using the pencils because then I have the opportunity to sharpen the pencils and then get put the color exactly where I want it, like this. But I wanted to soften that. So now what you're beginning to see is you're building dimension along the edge here, just like I began to build dimension along the edge here. And I did my lights and shadows up here. So by the time I get done with this, there'll be it'll have a lot more dimension to it than just using the watercolor. And it's possible because this watercolor that is the handmade watercolors like this is the bolder colors. And this other one that I used, where did I put it? And then these are the beam watercolors, BEAM. Let me turn that there so you can see beam watercolors. So these handmade watercolors give you that very gritty surface so that it accepts this pastel so well. And in this background here, where I've already put some of this grass, I can go back in now and build some other grass in there. I like what I call the broken color. I'm going to show you the difference. So the watercolor gives you a very solid line here. But you'll notice when I'm using the pastel, it gives me a bit of a broken line in there. And I like that because then it differentiates between what's far away in the background, in this case, the lighter grass, and the grass that's in the front or the foreground, which is very defined and very dark because you want your lighter in the background and your darker right here in the foreground. All right, so that is it for today's demonstration. I hope you enjoyed learning how to use the watercolors with the fun watercolor brushes, how to scrub up. Oh, you know what? I'm seeing one last thing here. Do you see all this speckle around the outside of that? I just took a a toothbrush, you want to use an old splayed toothbrush like that. So I took this old toothbrush and I literally dipped it down inside here. I got this all juicy and wet and then got some of the color on there and then did your typical like this. Make sure you're not wearing white. Your clothes are covered up before you do it. But I was able to do this all around my painting, and that gave me that really cool speckle that you see on there from the watercolor. So that was a little deviation there, but that's how I did that, was just with an old toothbrush. And so I will be finishing these, of course, offline, and then they will be available sometime during the week. I will put it up on my social media and you'll see that they're done and what they look like when they're completed and finished with all of the highlighting of um, my pastel pencils. Also, as I mentioned before, if you do want to pick up some of these pastel pencils, this particular brand that I like because they're hard enough that you can do the sharpening without losing the tip there. And I will be putting those onto my website this evening under the tab that says supply links. So you'll be able to find them there if you don't already have some or know where to get them. And okay.